Greetings, CNC enthusiast, Arduino enthusiast. I'm kind of both. Just wanted to give you a little demonstration on my CNC build that I did during the pandemic with minimal parts, minimal expenditure, and it's also a demonstration of the Arduino file that I wrote that runs this thing. This is not a GRBL file. This is nothing I paid for. This is something I created, and it was not easy. I'm a poor programmer. It took me a long time to get a lot of things figured out. But in the end, after a lot of frustration, a lot of hair pulling, and a lot of things that I had to slowly work through to try to understand, it's working pretty good. And I want to give you a full demonstration of that. So I got a little file load. I got the pen on here right now, ink pen. I'm not going to cut anything because that's way too noisy. So we're just going to draw a little thing and do a little talking and try to explain things. Just going to draw a little file that I came up with. A couple of sprockets. There's the center of one sprocket, half-inch circle. Here's a pretty simple sprocket. Big teeth. These sprocket files were generated with another Arduino program that I came up with. All I had to do was, for this first sprocket, was lay out 4 points in Corel and enter those into the XY coordinates and tell it how many replications I wanted, and it did the rest all the way around. Same is true for the second sprocket, which is a little more complicated, but it involves sub-arcs. This is also the same Arduino program that created this. The second sprocket, I think, was 3 points entered in the XY, and of course the I and J had to be entered as well in the center of the circle. Let's go and do a little rectangle. This is totally a standalone system with the Arduino file that I wrote. It's not connected to any computer other than the Arduino, and it reads all the Gcode files as text files. And there's no limit to the file size. The program reads G90 and G91 commands, and you can also add up to 50 characters of a comment line if you want to. That's going to go back after it draws this sub-arc, partial arc of the same diameter. It's going to come back here, and you'll see it's pretty much, it is spot on. This is real-time drawing. Now it's going to do the second sprocket with the opposite sub-arcs. I changed the G3 commands to G2s and reran the Arduino program and copied the serial print output to a text file. And just combined it with the other Gcode lines. And back to almost home. You can see, except for the pin wobble, which it always has a little bit, that's pretty much spot on. Now a brief look at the, I don't have all my boards and my voltage converters and my drivers, they all ride with the machine. So everything is attached to the Y rail, the Arduino and the DC voltage, DC motor driver, little LCD screen, a couple of buck converters. Here's the SD card reader, micro SD card reader right here. Various start-stop buttons, a couple of the little, this is the main power button. These are little selector buttons. The X end-stop switch is here. The Y end-stop switch is right here. Now, what's different about this system is, and I called it my $8 Pandemic CNC machine, I just used everything I had in the shop, trying to come up with something. And what I already had for years and had never used were these Teknic Clearpath Stepper Killer servo motors. This is an NEMA 23 on the X and NEMA 23 on the Y. And they're set at 200 steps per revolution. And as all the reduction, this is a chain drive system, reduced 25 to 1 down to a 10-tooth sprocket, which rides just a straight 2x4 on both sides, and it winds up being 2,000 steps per inch. And the y-axis is a threaded rod down in here, and it comes out also 2,000 steps per inch. The details of the rail system, or the support system, is these 2x4s are just good and straight, and they're screwed down to the big heavy table. Got a 9-degree V-groove cut on both sides. These little 3D printed rollers ride in that V-groove mostly for lateral stability in the Y direction. The stability in the Z direction is maintained by the weight of the machine riding on these two front rollers on both sides. On this half of the weight from here over, the back half of the weight actually rides on the 10-tooth sprockets down here. And if something gets hung up, you make a mistake, all it does is jump off of the 25 roller chain. That's all it does. It doesn't get hung up. These motors are so powerful, they just keep going, which is kind of a disadvantage in a way. But the reason these motors work, and the reason I didn't have to spend any other money, is my guide system on the Y and the Z. This does not involve there's no linear bearings, linear rails, or any kind. There's just spring-loaded slides or rollers. The bottom slides on the Y travel are spring-loaded with this piece right here, another top slide that just squeezes it all together so it can't wobble. And the same is true on the Z. I've got two rollers right here in a 9-degree V-groove. Opposite roller spring-loaded over here, pinches it all together, keeps it from wobbling, no play. Yet there's, with this type of arrangement, DC motor for Z and these two servo motors for X and Y, or X, Y in this particular case, the extra friction created by the construction is not a problem. Those SK motors, Clearpath motors, they're so torquey, they just handle it with ease. My first build was just a plotter that I did about 2.5 years ago, and it was very slow, very noisy. It was fairly precise, and I used it for quite a bit just to plot out things on large pieces of paper for what I need to do. Eventually I got to where I wanted a seam machine. Didn't want to spend the money because I hate spending money, and because the pandemic and everything else was going on, since I'm retired, I had nothing else to do. So I said I'm going to try to make this build out of everything that I basically have in the shop already. And since I've had all these motors for years and everything else is pretty simple, it wasn't I had all the electronics, all that stuff I already had too as well. That was basically the principle. Just see what I could do with the minimum amount of money expenditure. I did have to have the $8 set of router bits initially before I could make my first cut, and since that first cut I have since upgraded to a better spindle motor right there, a lot more powerful. Basically the reason I'm posting this, and the reason I'm kind of proud of it, the way it turned out, is about 3 weeks ago I came up with a much better algorithm for drawing the lines. It was something I just kind of popped in my head out of the blue. It wasn't anything I copied from anywhere. And after trying all kinds of things to get these X and Y lines to be straight and wind up at the same point at the same time, and everybody who knows CNC or programming with CNC, that can be a little bit problematic. It has been in the past. And So I improved it that way, my program, Arduino program, and then before the arcs and all the circles, I'd been using Bressingham's algorithm for the circles and stuff, and it just generates so many errors you have to keep track of so you don't get X and Y of drift. I decided to try to put my X and Y, my linear algorithm, involve it, to convert it into the arc part of the program. And so I had to do, in order to do that, I had to convert all these arcs, whether full circles or partial circles or whatever, into different segments, and it basically in chords. And depending on the size of the arc, that determines the number of segments that each circle or arc is divided into. Anything less than an inch in diameter, I think, is 24 segments, 15 degrees for each segment. And anything bigger than about 5 inches is 3 degrees, or 120 segments per the circle. And I got it to work. I don't know how it actually, there's a lot of little things that I had to take care of, a lot of calculations I had to do, especially for, of course, the sub-arcs, things that were not 360 degrees all the way around. That's a little difficult, but I finally got it all figured out, and I'm tickled to death with it. Had a great time doing this over the 2.5 years I've been playing with it, and I just wanted to share it. If anybody else is interested, you can leave a comment, let me know. And this is not a GRBL file, this is all my file. Didn't copy anything from anybody. I'm just tickled to death. Thanks a lot.